and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about the book and movie Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is by Judy Blume, published in 1970, and then the movie adaptation was released this year, 2023, and is directed by Kelly Freeman Craig. So Judy Blume is an author that I have heard so much about because her books were so important and so influential in the lives of so many girls and young women throughout the decades. But her books are also well known because they were commonly banned from schools because Judy Blume would write about things that were considered like taboo or inappropriate at the time. And for example, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret deals a lot with an 11-year-old girl and her changing body, and specifically like getting your period is a huge thing in this book and movie. And so this book at the time, like that wasn't something people were writing about, and they thought it was inappropriate, and so it would be banned. But this is the first book of hers I have ever read, and I really liked it. It is obviously meant for a younger audience, and the way it is written, like it's a very simple writing style, and it makes for a very quick read. But even though I'm not the target audience, like I said, I still really liked it, and I thought it was a really good message. And this movie is currently in theaters as of the time I'm recording this video, and I definitely think it's worth going to see in theaters. If not, it's at least worth streaming if you don't feel like going to the theaters, because I did like this a lot. I thought we get some incredible performances. Rachel McAdams as the mom and Kathy Bates as the grandma. I thought they were both incredible. And then the young actress who plays Margaret is really good too. And then actually all of the child actors I was impressed with, because I feel like everybody knows child actors, like it can be kind of risky, right? They're not always great. But I did think all of the child actors in this did a really great job. And it is also a very faithful adaptation. There are like two main changes I will be talking about, but overall, it stays very close to the book. So yeah, before I get into spoilers, I loved this movie and would definitely recommend it, and I enjoyed the book as well. So from here on out though, I'm going to be getting into the details of the book and movie, and so there will be spoilers. So beginning with Margaret's religion, so throughout this book and movie, Margaret will talk to God, and she always begins her prayers with, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret," hence the title. And Margaret's father was raised Jewish, whereas her mother was raised Christian, and so when the two of them got married, they decided they wouldn't live either religion, and Margaret would grow up not belonging to either one, and they decided that once she is older, she can just decide herself what she wants to be. And we learn that Margaret's mom, Barbara's parents were so upset that she was marrying a Jewish man that they disowned her and stopped talking to her, and that Margaret has never even met them. And in the book, this is something that's told to us like that Margaret has just known for a long time. Whereas in the movie, we get a scene where Margaret starts to wonder like, why don't I talk to my mom's parents? And so she asks her about it, and this is when we get a very poignant scene where McAdams' character, Barbara, tells Margaret about her experience with her parents. And it was very touching and sad. And then when Margaret begins 6th grade, the teacher has them like fill out a paper saying their likes and dislikes. And in dislikes, she dislikes religious holidays. And so in both, her teacher thinks this is kind of odd. And so he talks to her about it. And she explains that because she doesn't belong to a religion, she just doesn't enjoy religious holidays. And later, when he tells the class that they're going to have this year-long project where he wants them to focus on a subject, and at the end of the year, they will turn in like a project based on whatever subject they chose. And so Margaret, she's like, you know what? I'm going to choose religion. And throughout the next year, I'm going to go to different services. And this year, I'm going to finally decide like what I am as far as my religion goes. And in the movie, the teacher actually suggests this. So when she tells him she doesn't like religious holidays, the teacher is the one who's like, you know, maybe religion could be your year-long project. Whereas in the book, it was her own decision. But throughout the book and movie, she goes to different religious services. She goes to temple with her grandma Sylvia. She goes to church with her friend. She like kind of goes to a Catholic confession. And yeah, she just tries these different denominations. But near the end of the movie and book, she is talking to God and she's like, I don't feel you in any of the churches I go to. And where I feel God is when I'm alone. And so she kind of realizes, I guess, just how personal your relationship to God is, you know. But that Christmas, Barbara, her mother, decides to send her parents a Christmas card. And in the movie, we see that this is kind of spurred by Margaret asking about the grandparents, whereas in the book, it seems kind of random. But they write back the following April and they're like, hey, we're getting older and we want to see our only daughter and we want to get to know our granddaughter, Margaret. And they are visiting the week Margaret had been supposed to go down and visit her grandma, Sylvia. So Margaret is very upset about this because she was looking forward to visiting her other grandma, and now she has to stay home for these grandparents who she hasn't even met before. And when the grandparents do show up, at first it goes well. However, after dinner, the grandparents ask Margaret how she likes Sunday school, and this is when she tells them, like, I don't go to Sunday school. And this starts a disagreement between Margaret's parents and the grandparents. And as they're arguing about this, Margaret is just kind of sitting there. And then she stands up and she tells them, like, just stop it. Stop arguing about this. I don't even believe in God and I am nothing. And so just stop trying to push these different things on me. And then the next day, the grandparents, they stay the night there and they were supposed to stay the whole week. But the next day, the grandparents tell Barbara, like, oh, we're actually going to go to New York City now. And Barbara is like, what? Like, I thought you were staying a whole week. And they're like, we are. We're just going to spend the rest of the week in New York City. And so Barbara, of course, is very hurt by this. And the husband is like, I don't think they even came out here just for us. I think they came out here to go to New York City. They just stopped by here because it was convenient. And so yeah, Barbara is just very upset about this and hurt, obviously. And then in the book, later on in the week, a few days later, Sylvia shows up and she's like, so where are your other grandparents? And Margaret tells her that they already left. And Sylvia was like, oh, darn, like I'd wanted to meet them. And then when Margaret tells her, like, yeah, you know, they started talking about religion and they got into an argument, and Sylvia is like, I knew it. Like, I knew they were going to try to push you into, you know, their religion. Whereas in the movie, Sylvia shows up the very same day the grandparents do. So she knew they were visiting because, remember, Margaret was supposed to go visit Sylvia. And so Sylvia, purposefully in the movie, she shows up the very same day. And so they're having dinner, all of them together, and it's going well. But then after dinner, as in the book, the grandparents, you know, mention church. And then this causes an even bigger argument in the movie, really, because Sylvia is part of the argument as well. And she's like, Margaret is Jewish. She's already been to temple with me. And then the grandparents are like, the child should be the religion of the mother, so she should be Christian. She needs to be baptized. And then Margaret's parents are like, Margaret is nothing. Stop trying to push this on her. And then, as in the book, Margaret stands up and she yells at them to stop, saying that, you know, she doesn't even believe in God and that they all just need to quit it. And I thought having Sylvia show up in the movie at the same time the grandparents were there was a nice touch. Like, it makes for some like awkward, tense moments. But we also see how even though Sylvia is more accepting, obviously, because she didn't cut her son off, right? And she has a great relationship with Margaret and the relationship is so sweet. But at the same time, like, she is also kind of trying to push Judaism on Margaret, and she's also trying to speak on Margaret's behalf, being like, she's already Jewish, rather than letting Margaret speak for herself, right? And this causes Margaret to just see religion as something people argue about, right? And something that can tear a family apart. But speaking of Sylvia, though, like I said, she's a great character in the book and movie. Kathy Bates was amazing, and I thought the bond she had with Margaret was, yeah, just very sweet, and I loved it. And at the start of the book and movie, Margaret and her family live in New York City, which is where Sylvia lives as well. However, at the beginning, they tell Margaret, we're moving to New Jersey. And so this moving from the city to a suburb in New Jersey is a big part of, you know, this coming of age year for Margaret. And Sylvia is very sad that they are moving. And in the movie, there's a scene where she calls them up when they're in New Jersey, and she says something to Barbara about how she read that when you don't live near loved ones, your lifespan decreases exponentially. And she's like, but I've had a good run of it, I guess. And it was a funny scene, but it was also, you know, sad because we do get moments with just Sylvia and we see how her life just feels kind of empty and she's very lonely. And so she decides to go down to Florida. And in the book, I believe she like moves to Florida. Whereas in the movie, I'm not sure if it's just an extended vacation or if she actually moved there. Not quite sure. But in both, she does go down to Florida and she meets this guy there named Mr. Binneman, who she has a relationship with. And she brings Mr. Binneman with her when she comes up to visit in New Jersey. But to move on to Margaret's time at school. So in both book and movie, she befriends a girl named Nancy who lives close to her. She's like a neighbor. And therefore, she befriends Nancy's friend group. So there is this group of 4 of them who are friends. And Nancy in particular, like, she is very bossy. And she also says mean things about this other girl in their class whose name is Laura. And Laura is taller than all of the other girls and she is more developed, you know, she has breasts, whereas the other girls don't yet. And because of this, she's just the brunt of a lot of jokes. And the book also says how the male teacher will like ogle her, which is gross because she's like an 11-year-old girl. But also one of the rumors that is spread about Laura is that she goes behind the A&P with Nancy's brother and his friend Moose. And then near the end of the book and movie, Margaret has this like group project going on in her class and the groups were assigned and Laura was assigned to be one of her partners. And so they are working after school and Margaret is just feeling moody and she like lashes out at Laura. And in this moment, she says something about how she knows that Laura goes behind the A&P and lets boys feel her up. And Laura is obviously very hurt by this and she gets up and leaves and Margaret suddenly feels terrible. And so she runs after her and Laura is like, you know, like, it's not my fault that I look this way and people spread rumors and lies about me just because I matured earlier. Like, I don't have a choice. Like, I didn't control this. Like, it just happened. And yet because of it, so many people are judgmental towards me. And Margaret is really struck by this and she feels terrible for contributing to the bullying and judging of Laura. And then this is basically like the end of the Laura storyline in the book. She just like feels bad about it. And then I think that's like it. Whereas in the movie, there's this like after school or this end of school party that is going on. And Margaret sees Laura and she's all by herself. And Margaret goes up to her and she's like, hey, do you want to dance? And so the two of them go on the dance floor and are dancing. And then one of the other girls who was part of the Nancy friend group, she joins them and the three of them are just like being cute and dancing. And I just love that they had that added scene in the movie to just really tie things up nicely with the Laura plot line and see how Margaret realizes how Nancy is not a nice person and how she befriends Laura. And yeah, I just thought it was a really sweet scene, and that was not in the book. Something that was in the book though was near the end. Moose, that's the kid who they rumored that Laura would go behind the A&P with Moose. And so she goes up to him and she's like, why did you lie about Laura? Like, that wasn't true. Why are you telling lies? And Moose is like, I never said that at all. And so Margaret realizes that it was Nancy who started the rumor. So again, just furthering her realization that Nancy is just not a nice person. But to talk about Nancy and their friend group, Nancy, like I've been saying, she is very judgy and she's very concerned with what other people think. And she's obviously very self-conscious, right? And has a low self-esteem. And that is what causes her to belittle others and to boss them around. And so you don't like her, but at the same time, you can kind of feel bad for her too. And in their friend group, they make different rules. And one of the rules is that you have to wear a bra, but Margaret doesn't wear one yet. So she has to ask her mom for one. And then they also agreed that when one of them gets their period, that one needs to tell the others all about it. And then another rule they have is that they have a boy book where they have to write the boys that they think are cute. And everybody says that they like Philip Leroy, but Margaret says she likes Moose, but then Nancy doesn't like Moose, and everybody else is saying Philip Leroy. And so Margaret lies and she says she put Philip too. Which, by the way, I liked the stuff with Philip because they're all like, oh, Philip, he's so dreamy. But as Margaret gets to know him, like, turns out he is just kind of a jerk. And so she realizes, like, okay, well, this kid is lazy and he's stupid and he's mean. But anyway, so eventually one of them does get her period and she tells the others about it, and the other three are just all so jealous. And then Nancy at some point, she says she got hers next. And so Margaret again is just very jealous that Nancy has gotten hers. But then Margaret goes with Nancy to a trip into the city with Nancy's family, and they go to the restroom together, and Nancy starts crying and freaking out, and she's like, go get my mom. And so Margaret gets Nancy's mom, and we realize that Nancy has her period. And so Margaret is like, does she always react this way? And Nancy's mom is like, this is her first time, actually. And so Margaret realized that Nancy had lied about it. And so Margaret in that moment, she's like shocked that Nancy had lied, but then she also like kind of pities her too, because she's like, you know, as much as I want to have my period, I don't want it so bad that I'm gonna lie about it. And so you kind of feel bad for Nancy, where she cares so much about what others think, and she wants to be important and liked. And at the end of the movie too, we see Nancy see Margaret dancing with Laura along with the other friend. I think her name is Janie. And you just see how she is affected by this. And hopefully it'll help her change her ways, right? But who's to say? But in the end of the book and movie, it ends with Margaret getting her period, and she is, of course, just like so grateful and so happy. And in the movie especially, I thought this was a sweet scene between her and her mom. And then as well as the scene where she goes to get a bra with her mom too, which also the scene where the mom, Barbara, tells her about her parents. After that, we get them going to the mall together to get Margaret her bra. And in voiceover, Margaret is praying to God, and she's saying how like, my mom is like such a good, kind person, and like she doesn't deserve to be treated poorly, and she's just like asking God to look out for her mom, which was a really sweet scene. And that wasn't in the book either. But to talk about Barbara, so one thing I liked better about the movie is that we get more with Barbara, the mom. And in the book, she's a stay-at-home mom who paints, and that's basically it. Like we hear about the stuff with her parents, but we just don't get too much with her. Whereas, yeah, in the movie, she was definitely more of a focus. And so in New York City, she had been an art teacher, but now that they're in New Jersey, she is going to be a stay-at-home mom, and she's really excited about this, and she signs up for all of these PTA committees. But then we see her just kind of trying to adjust to this, and there's a moment when she sees a bird outside in the front window, and it's this beautiful bird, and so she grabs her art supplies and she starts to paint it, but then it flies away. And by the end of the movie, we see that she has become an art teacher at a local store in New Jersey, and the PTA lady walks up to her and she's like, hey, like I know some committees you would be great for next year. But Barbara tells the woman like, thank you, but I don't want to. And then we also just throughout this movie get more moments between her and Margaret bonding. And we have the moments I've already talked about, but there was also a time when I think it was after the grandparents leave, we see Margaret and her mom just like hugging each other on the couch and just having this moment where they're comforting each other. And yeah, I just loved seeing their bond together and seeing how Barbara is trying to adjust to Margaret trying to adjust to her changing body and all that, right? And how her relationship with her daughter is changing as her daughter gets older. But there's also a scene in the movie where Barbara finds out that Margaret went to temple with Sylvia, and she's like, I don't want you going to church yet. You're supposed to wait till you're grown up and then you can decide. Wait till you're older. And Margaret is like, I'm almost 12, as if she is so old. And obviously Barbara kind of laughs at this because 12 is very young still. But of course, Margaret, who thinks she's so grown up now, is, very upset about that and storms off. But that was a funny scene. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on how with this movie, I loved how we had more moments with just Sylvia and just Barbara. And I loved how it shows that, this is a coming of age movie about Margaret. But by focusing on Sylvia and Barbara as well, we see how we are constantly figuring out who we are and trying to discover ourselves and trying to adjust to life. And we are always having these coming of age moments, regardless of how old we are. And so that was just more of a thing in the movie than it had been in the book. And I just really loved that. But to get to the book versus movie section of this, even though I am glad I have finally read a Judy Blume book, I will say the movie wins for all of the reasons I've just talked about. It was just very sweet and heartfelt and genuine without being overly earnest and sappy, and the performances were amazing. And it was very faithful to its source material while changing a few things and improving on the source material, in my opinion. So yeah, the movie wins. I would highly recommend it. The book, honestly, if you see the movie, I don't think you even need to read the book, to be completely honest. So I would just recommend the movie. And that wraps it up for today's Book First Movie video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have seen this movie, let me know your thoughts down below. And if you are someone who read Judy Blume when you were younger, let me know how it affected you at a young age, because I am curious what I would have thought of this book had I read it when I was younger. So I kind of wish I would have, but it is what it is. So let me know how Judy Blume affected your childhood and your adolescence or your early adulthood as well. Which, by the way, to get into my own personal story, since this book obviously deals with getting your period and the girls are all so excited to get it and they're so desperate and they want it so bad. I remember I definitely wanted to grow up, and I was the youngest of 5 girls. And so my older sisters, I always just wanted to be where they were, right? And I wanted to be able to bond over things the way they were bonding, but I was just so much younger. And so I do remember wanting to be older so that I could connect with them in that more mature way. However, I was not overly anxious to get my period, so I don't remember wanting it so bad. So I couldn't relate to Margaret in that aspect of it. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to give my podcast a rating and review if you listen to this as a podcast. And if you want to help support the channel financially, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month, and you get exclusive Patreon content, and it would also just mean so much to me if you did that. But I just appreciate you watching this, and if you share it with friends and family or on social media, that's awesome too. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!